Still crazy to think this is what I looked like 2 years ago. I can hardly see any resemblance, and, well, I kinda think that's a good thing. But I'll have you be the judge. So, this is what I look like 2 years later. I think I certainly look a lot better. In fact, even if I just kind of held back the hair a little bit to make it look a little shorter, I think I've got a much better looking face. And in general, I just feel a lot better than when I took that picture. I still had a lot of thoughts in my head that still weren't straightened out, and now I feel like they are. So unlike last time when I went through the basic steps of my journey, I figured I'd bring up a few interesting talking points here or there. I hope you will enjoy. So I'm not gonna lie, for my 1 year anniversary, it was something I had been planning on for a while. I had particular talking points I wanted to go over, as well as just my general life story. Well, I didn't want to repeat of either the first year or all the other progress videos I've done. So instead, I'm going to bring up topics that I've heard other trans people talk about, but somehow I completely missed out on. And I figure as a way to keep it entertaining, I'm going to try different clothes on for each section, as well as film in different locations. I find that's a good way to keep your audience engaged, is if you kind of move around a little bit. If you stay completely still, it's kind of boring. So this particular area was an interesting one I never really thought of. It's a pretty short list in all honesty. I think probably the biggest thing though is the idea of how long this would take. In fact, I remember when I was talking to the doctor about this, I figured on average it takes maybe like 2 years for a cis woman to fully mature. And I figure because I'm starting from going a man to a woman on hormones, it would take about the same amount of time, if not maybe longer. However, in the back of my mind, I just read so many stories about people that were able to transition quite quickly, to be able to have a chest within like 2 months, being completely distinguishable only as a woman rather than a man within like 5 or 6 months and stuff like that. And I feel like for me it was a fair bit slower, which kind of annoyed me. The main thing is, once I realized I wanted to transition, I just had enough with my male body. I wanted the female body as soon as humanly possible. In fact, that's one of the things I think about. I've heard people say it's better to transition slowly. It looks a bit more natural in the long run. So when I started hormone replacement therapy with my doctor, she gave me several options I could go for. And the main thing I said is I wanted something in the medium range. I feel like if I went too fast, well, it would definitely give me the gratification I want. I'm not sure if it'd have long lasting effects. And I definitely didn't want the slow option. I just had it and I wanted to go for it. So I figured the medium was the best bet. One of the other things I think about is the hair. I had no idea that long hair could be this much fun. I wish that I could have done this sooner. I feel like it's a lot more expressive. I can tangle it up, I can tie it, I can wear it up, I can do a whole bunch of different things with it. But part of me does kind of wish I realized that it would turn out curly. I was personally hoping for flat hair because I find flat hair seems to grow faster. Curly hair, it seems like it just kind of grows out rather than down. I think that's about all I can think of. I kind of knew what I was getting into. I realized that there was probably going to be a fair bit of people that weren't going to accept this, and some of those people might even be friends or family. And I can definitely say I've been quite fortunate that I've been able to tell both, and there hasn't really been too much of a snag. Sure, they might have a hard time getting the name right, or there's my dad who just incessantly refuses to get my name or my pronouns right. But I'm still talking with everybody, so I think I'm alright there. definitely say, though, the trolls did take me by surprise. I've always had a lot of self-confidence, and even more so now that I've started transitioning. And part of me always thought, have these trolls, bring 'em on, I can take 'em on. But the first time I met one, they rocked me completely to my core. And the biggest thing that annoyed me is I've always hated to lose an argument, and this was no exception. Sure, I was brutally beaten, but the main thing I couldn't stand is, in cutting them out of the server, I feel like I kind of forfeited. I didn't actually win. Sure, didn't really seem like I was going to be able to change that guy's mind, but, I don't know, I just hate being defeated in that aspect. I feel like everything I did figure out later was for a reason. Like, for example, I had no idea that I would love how well my face looks now that I've started hormone replacement therapy. And I feel like that would have been spoiled if I knew that before, because then I'd be like, okay, is my face good yet? How about now? Now? Here it's more like, I'm starting to look pretty nice. And other things like that. So most of the time whenever I make these videos, I seem to just focus on the more physical attributes of transitioning. However, I figured now would be a good time to try to dive a little into the psychological changes of transitioning. So probably the first thing to note. So I find generally when anybody is being raised male, it is very frowned upon for you to ever show emotions. You have to kind of fend for yourself. Boys don't cry, for instance, stuff like that. And so you get used to the idea of having to bottle up emotions because everyone's just like, oh, grow up. Oh, stop crying. Men don't do that. Have a similar nature like that. But yeah, when it comes to transitioning the female, all that is off the table. In fact, it's almost kind of expected for you to be a little over-emotional. And even taking society out of it, I feel like I'm feeling a lot more emotions now. It could also be the hormones working its magic as well. But another big thing I think about is I had to hide this part of myself for a very long time because, well, I thought it was just some sort of dream that I could just only think about and it would just never come to fruition. And B, well, I just thought it was a kink for a while and I figured this is something I have to take care of on my own. But coming out as trans to both friends and family, you almost kind of have to go against that mentality that you gotta keep it all to yourself. You have to be a bit more open to be able to do so. It takes a lot of strength to be able to say that, yes, I have been suffering for years, but I just have too stone of a face for you to even be able to tell. And so in being more honest with myself, I feel like I've also become more honest with other people as well. Like even some of the friends I had, I only really ever let them get so close to me because I had a heart of stone. Which even then, the main reason they got close is because they kept hammering at that heart of stone. But now that I've softened up a little bit, I feel like I have a much deeper connection with my friends, as well as my family even, which causes me to be a little more open. In fact, I'm making these videos about my personal life. I'm perfectly fine with sharing it. I don't feel awkward. I don't feel like I'm destroying something. Although part of me does get a little nervous in case I get the occasional troll or something, but you're on the internet, that's something that tends to happen. So that's it in terms of like being open. But maybe another thing as well, perhaps I'll try to discuss the basic psychology of dysphoria. Much like being trans, this is something everybody experiences, just a little different. For me, the dysphoria I had before I figured out I was trans was something that was in the background. It's like the equivalent of watching a really good movie, but it's on a really old tape, so the whole time you just kind of hear. It kind of blends into the background, and then you get used to it. Realizing I was trans was basically me getting a Blu ray copy of that same movie. Not only was the picture quality better, but the sound. And because I realized how much better it could be, it just leaves me to wonder how I put up with this other version for so long. And in fact, that was one of the crazy things. Once I realized how much better my life would be as a woman, the idea of being a man was just the worst form of mental torture there was. However, what was weird is after I discovered I was trans, that's when the dysphoria, instead of just being that little humming noise in the background that annoyed me, basically just became a full on tormentor. It made me kind of take stock of my life and realize that I was never really happy in that body, and that I really wanted to physically and mentally transition. And I just couldn't get done HRT fast enough. It was just every single day I was like, come on, I want to fix this. Don't let me be stuck in this gross body anymore. But once I was on hormones, that quelled a little bit. In fact, I will never forget for that first week I was on HRT, the whole time I just had this big smile on my face. Sure, I figured it was going to take a while in order to see any progress, but the idea that I took the first step on this long journey was more than enough. I just kind of saw how much happier my future would be, and, well, I haven't really regretted it since. In fact, if anyone were to ask me, would you ever go back? I would give you a wholehearted no. I like being this way. I actually have a body I finally feel comfortable in. And as such, a lot of things feel better to me. Like, for instance, hugging. This was something I would have to do all the time in order to say goodbye to relatives or really clingy friends, and I just hated the feeling of it. Now, though, I feel alright. In fact, there are some times I like to hug myself because I'm comfortable now. And I feel like I kind of share that comfort every time I get a hug as well. It's nice to be able to get like this nice warm feeling as opposed to a okay, yeah. It's a world of difference. But after transitioning, when it comes to the idea of dysphoria, it's something that kind of comes and goes every so often. Occasionally, I'll be hit by maybe like a troll, or maybe like an internal troll, where all of a sudden I'll think I'll not be good enough or something like that. But these moments are really fleeting compared to how I felt before. For the most part, all I have to do is just look in the mirror, just kind of play around with my hair. The idea that very subtle things like that. Probably the only thing that really causes dysphoria at this point is, well, I wish I had a more feminine voice. But at the same time, I get allergies very often, and that makes it really hard to keep on with the training. And I will admit, I get kind of jealous of some trans women that are able to fully transition in like 10 months or something like that. And I'm going on about 2 years, and I still feel like I got a little ways to go. But at least on the bright side, I'm liking how this looks so far. I figured what would be an interesting talking point is to maybe compare and contrast some of the things I've lost in becoming a woman, but also some of the things I've gained in becoming a woman as well. So I figure go over the things I've lost. So one of the more obvious things is I'm a little unsure as to what I'm supposed to wear at this point. Like a big example I can think of is if I were to go swimming. Well, I got the top half of a woman and the bottom half of a man. Should I just combine the two. Or maybe there's some sort of other alternative I can get, but it just gets a little more confusing. Or even another basic thing, it's like, what should I wear on a job interview, for instance? I always relied on this one suit that I bought several years ago, and I would just always throw that on if ever I needed to look formal. Of course, that one is a little less scary now that I've got all these nice dresses. I feel like I could probably pull off an interview just fine. Probably one of the more obvious things is that obviously I can't go topless anymore. But then again, I had never really felt comfortable in doing that in the first place, so is it really something I've given up? A lot of people say that there's a bit more of a prestige, you get a little more respect as a man, but I don't know, I feel like I've gained a lot more respect as a woman, in all honesty. But I will admit, it seems like there's a lot more like derogatory jokes against women as opposed to against men, so maybe there's a little something there, but it's just kind of inconsequential to me. Perhaps if I want to go into a more darker section, I guess it should be a little more scarier that I'm alone at night, for instance. But then again, I feel like I was always kind of a target for that sort of attack anyway, so but I guess at the same time I do maybe maintain a little bit of my muscular build from before, so maybe I can fend off myself, but the ability to use the bathroom standing up. Of course, this is something I've just kind of gotten into the habit of not doing for so long that I honestly don't really miss it. The only time I ever really go to the bathroom standing up is when I'm at work. While my work is relatively accepting, there's still a lot of older people there that I don't want to accidentally push the line by starting to use the women's room on them. Because after all, there are just too many people that still see me as a man, and that is the last place I want to run into any problems. Because at least if it happened in public, I could just explain it away by saying, take a look at my driver's license or my birth certificate. Well, definitely driver's license. Who carries around their birth certificate with them? Like, seriously. And if I did it at work, I could potentially be fired, and then bad things could happen. And I guess maybe if I want to go for a stretch, is that it takes me a little while longer to get ready whenever I have to go anywhere. Of course, I don't really see this as a bad thing necessarily, because before, I would just kind of roll out of bed. Something like this, for instance, look in the mirror and be like, good enough. Now I'm more like, so while it takes a little while longer, I feel a lot more pleased with myself. Now that I can be beautiful, I want to be beautiful all the time. And I think that's one of the main things I've gained right there is, well, I feel pretty. That's not something I ever felt before. I just always felt like hairy, sweaty, stinky, greasy. And now I don't really feel that way anymore. I will admit, sometimes I do feel a little hairy, which is annoying, and, well, it does seem like I have a lot less endurance now, so while on the whole I don't sweat as much, it seems like it's a lot easier to exert myself too much to the point where I'm kind of drenched. But then again, maybe it's also the yard work I'm doing is just a bit more intense than I'm used to. So this one is more of like a petty thing, but it's weird. Back when I was able to grow facial hair, part of me always wanted to have one of those famous hot shaves where they actually bring out the cutthroat razor, they make the cream, they got like a nice hot towel, stuff like that. That's something I've always wanted to experience. But yet now I can't. But at the same time, I don't have to shave anymore. I love laser hair removal. I have It's like I have my face back now. I figure now is probably the time to move on to things that I've gained. Well, there's just a lot more I feel like I've gained. Like, even taking out physical attributes, I've gained a much better sense of self worth that I really didn't have before. I will admit I was kind of proud of myself, but not because of who I was physically, but who I was mentally. And now I feel like both are just fantastic. I love how I feel, I love how I look, and I love the idea that I can actually feel emotions now, and that's definitely a big thing I've gained right there. Is that not only do I feel emotions, but they almost feel a little bit differently now. Like, happiness seems to hit a lot harder now. Sadness might also be the same way, but, well, I just cry for like 10 minutes and I feel a whole lot better than if I just kind of kept that to myself and then just blew up on some random guy that bumped into me on the streets or at the grocery store or something like that. Probably one of the other great things that I've gained from being a woman is, well, I feel like now I can dress a lot more pretty. And on top of that, it doesn't confuse me anymore. I can just throw on a dress and leave the house. I can dress up like this, show it off, and I don't feel awkward. I don't feel like I'm giving myself away or I'm doing some sort of naughty business. One of the biggest things that I've gained is perspective. I've learned a lot of different things in becoming a woman. For instance, I would see women wearing like really short skirts, short shorts, or like things where they looked clearly uncomfortable, and the idea that they kept dragging them down a little bit or trying to make sure that they were more covered. But at the same time, I realized that it takes a while to shave your legs, and that's something that I personally want to show off, and I figure that's the logic here as well. Is the idea that you want to be able to show off your hard work, but without being a little too promiscuous at the same time. That's about all the crazy subjects I can think of. So now is the section of the video I like to devote to what actually happened in the month. In general, I can say this month was off to a very promising start. So there's this one friend I have that doesn't live too far away, and I've often gone over to his house. And at that point, I started wearing consistently a B cup for my bra. And I just always love how open he is about this. He just kind of straight out said, "Are your boobs getting bigger?" And for me, I'm just kind of like, "Aw." Which, I mean, it's hard to explain. In a ways, I would have to say yes, because, well, they're big enough that I need a bra now, but at the same time, I'm just barely a B, so it makes them look a little bit bigger than they actually are, but not too much. After that, I'm not really sure what was going on. Maybe it was allergies or something else, but I just kept getting this bout of lightheadedness and dizziness for like several days. And after talking to my secondary care, I figured it'd be a good idea to talk to my primary care to try to figure out what is going on. Especially after my last blood test revealing that I'm a little on the anemic side. But at least I can say that's not the fault of the hormones, because I felt lightheaded getting blood drawn even before I started transitioning. At the request, I got another blood drawn, and unlike last time where that needle really hurt, it actually wasn't that bad. Although it felt like the phlebotomist took a very weak vein, because while it didn't hurt that much, it felt like it was just kind of like plop. But usually with this one, it's just kind of like done. I got the results back, And, well, I had a low hemoglobin level the first time. It was back to my relatively normal range this time. There was one thing I found that was extremely high, but I've never heard of such a thing. I talked to a few friends about this because, well, I was a little nervous about the lightheadedness. I talked to other people trying to figure this out. And it was interesting. This value that was high basically was telling me that I was fighting some really intense allergies. Which part of me kind of figured that was the case because I get some pretty bad allergies this time of year. It is not fun. But this is probably the second time it's thrown me off balance, and for that long. But the thing that was annoying is that after talking to my primary care, they kept saying, you need to schedule an appointment. So I did. And it was about 2 weeks after getting the blood drawn, so. And by that point, the lightheadedness was gone, so the issue wasn't there. But probably the biggest event. So some of the more studious viewers may note that this is a new dress. This was the last major event that happened this month. So a girlfriend of mine, can I still use that term? I mean, she's a friend that's a girl. But anyway, she threw out this suggestion to me saying it's been a while since she ever did any clothes shopping, and asked if I wanted to go along. Me wanting to basically experience every facet of being a woman, I wanted to go for it. I had the stereotypical girls' night out, and now I can add the shopping trip to this. The only thing missing is maybe the old girl slumber party, but I think I'm just a little too old for that sort of stuff. As for the shopping trip, it was quite a unique experience because, well, I don't really go to name brand stores. Quite frankly, when I pay full price, I feel like I'm being ripped off. So I was a little hesitant when she said she wanted to go to one of the more name brand stores, but she also kind of reassured me that they had a lot of sales racks, and wow, they had a lot of sales racks. I was able to pick up quite a few things, but the main thing to note is, so I picked up this dress that day. I also picked up this interesting invention I've never heard of. It's called a sweater dress. It's basically like a long dress like this, except it's sweater material, and it's relatively warm. Although it seems weird that I kind of have to wear pants with it because there's a little bit of a draft, and that kind of keeps me feeling a little cold. And then the other thing I picked up was an orange corduroy skirt, and wow, I feel like I just kind of completely ripped off Azul's Crescent's Cheryl there. I mean, seriously, just a side-by-side only just needs a blonde wig. I know who I'm going as for Halloween. For most of that shopping trip, I just felt like a stranger in a strange land. I just followed her as closely as I could because, well, it was kind of a big store, and not only did I not want to get lost, but I wasn't really sure what to look for. I was kind of inundated with so many choices. But probably the most surreal thing of it all is the main reason she wanted to go shopping was to pick up some underwear. Now, maybe this is just my upbringing, but I feel like, well, in general, boys don't really shop with other boys to buy like new clothes and stuff. Although my older brother would occasionally take me on these little shopping sprees, which I hated with a passion. So I guess maybe there's something there, but I can't imagine too many boys getting together to buy underwear. I feel like that's something a little too personal, and the idea that she didn't feel awkward by it, I felt like I had the awkwardness for the both of us. And I even told her that. It's like, not only do I feel awkward because I feel like it's really personal for you, but well, I mean, I'm a woman and all, but there's just something about going into an underwear store that just feels very wrong. It just kind of feels like I'm going back into that old identity of thinking this was a kink, and well, it just kind of seemed like there was a lot of kinky stuff in there. Of course, when we couldn't find any underwear at the big box place, we then went to Victoria's Secret. So, yeah. And I remember I posed her the question that I posed, I think, in last month's video. I never really understood why women's underwear was so ornate and very beautiful. It's like, who on earth is going to see this? But she kind of gave me the explanation that I thought the general thing was. It's not only something kind of confidence building, but it almost makes you feel a little pretty, a little bit more on the sexier side as well, that kind of stuff. At the same time, it's just like, wow, that's expensive. And then probably one of the other fun things is I picked up some perfume. This was something I was kind of been after for a little while because while I don't have the stank that I used to have as a man, I feel like I don't really smell like a woman, and I know that seems like a very odd thing to have dysphoria about, but well, I think people have had quote-unquote weirder things that made them feel dysphoria. But I wanted something that legitimately made me smell nice. Because up to that point, all I just really did was put on deodorant and... well, I didn't really care about myself in the before time, so I didn't even do that too much. So I got this little perfume bottle, and I love the scent of it, and I just love the idea that I smell like a woman now. It makes me happy. It makes me feel very pretty. I think probably the only other big thing to note is like long-time viewers may know that I'm just not a person that likes to spend a lot of money. So I spent over $100 during that shopping spree. Well, I could definitely say I had a lot of fun with it. Not only was this something I wanted to experience, but she made it a lot of fun. But probably the thing I found interesting is she said, I have a lot of confidence. I guess that's just something I kind of take for granted, but at the same time I was kind of nervous, but I guess I hit it pretty well. And I guess that confidence kind of took away any of the awkward nature that it would have brought around. But yeah, it's one of those things. I'd like to do it again, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm spending all my money. There is one last thing I want to end with. So, I was gonna potentially just refilm the scene of stuff I've lost and stuff I gained, but the lighting wasn't quite right, and I figured this would make a better epilogue. So, one of the things I'm very happy about is I felt like being male, it seemed like that identity was always brought into question. Like, it seemed like you always had to prove your manliness. It's like, oh, you're not brave enough, you're probably a woman. Oh, you're not strong enough, you're probably a woman. Oh, you don't like playing sports, you're probably a woman. That's not very manly things. Is this the kind of thing a manly, red-hot-blooded man should be doing? But yet being a woman, I feel like I don't really have to prove myself. I mean, I have to prove myself to people that don't believe me because, well, despite it all, I still kind of have some mannerisms. But I mean, other women that know my story, they're just kind of like, oh, okay. It's not like they're like, ooh, your boobs are not very big. You're not a real woman. Ooh, you're not very cutesy whenever you see an adorable puppy. You're not a real woman. What? You don't cry at the end of your name? You're not a real woman. None of that ever happened. And probably one of the other things, and this is where I will end it with, is it almost seems like with men, there's almost like a measuring contest, shall we say? There's no female equivalent to that. It's like one of those, yes, we all have these. Some like them better than others. Some are a little bigger than others, and others, you're just kind of like, how in the world is their back still holding all that? But I feel like there isn't as much like infighting or having to prove yourself as much as when I was being a man. So yeah, that is my. So yeah, that's me after 2 years on HRT. It's still amazing that, well, I made it this far. There are times I didn't think I would actually get here. There were times when I was much younger I didn't think this was even possible. But while I'm not finished, I do very much like where things are heading. I feel comfortable. I feel fantastic in so many different ways. The only real complaint, I wish I didn't have all these fainting spells. I wish I could keep a little bit of my muscle from before. And I wish that I could be halfway regular when it comes to going to the bathroom. But other than that, let's keep going, baby! So as always, if you have any other things you'd like to talk about, feel free to leave them in the comments. And as always, no politics. I beg of you. Until next time, be yourself, no matter who that is.